Buildings have lives of their own, but if they're not cared for, they die. All the forces of nature conspire inexorably to pull a building down. Only defense is maintenance. Buildings protect us from the elements, but nothing protects them from the rain, wind, sun, heat, frost. So we in turn have to protect our buildings. There's no material, no design that can long survive the accumulated effects of neglect. People don't want to do maintenance for perfectly understandable reasons. There's nothing positive about it, just expense and hassle and nothing really gained. After years of nagging, you finally refinish the floors, hire the roofers, replace the damn heating system, and what have you got? You're back to square one, big deal. And yet, the issue is core and absolute. No maintenance, no building. Buildings are constantly subject to invasion by unwelcome life forms, dry rot, wet rot, and insects. 1.3 million people in Britain make a living in the building trade, a large number of them fighting the processes of decay. For Vic Moore and Dave Weaver, it's rot.
Well, dry rot is basically a fungal attack on timber. In every cubic foot of air within the country, there are millions of spores of dry rot. So there's dry rot around you at all times, and it actually germinates by just arriving on the timber, and the conditions being right, it then develops on that timber that's there. Dry rot has got its name from the ability to take the moisture out of timber, and it leaves it in a dry condition, so that when it actually, you get the timber, you go like this, it actually powders. And it's a misleading fact, actually, because you have to have the timber wet to get dry rot. It cannot actually form on dry timber. Dry rot is like a cancer. It creeps behind the plaster, it creeps behind the timber, and you don't really see it until it bursts out somewhere. And when I go and look at these things, I look at them and I say, you got a bit of dry rot, and people look and they think, oh, it's fairly localized. When you can actually say, well, this may be in your floor joists, your plaster's got to come off, your walls have got to be drilled and irrigated. Then they start to realise what it's all about.
The root of all evil in buildings is water. It dissolves buildings. It consumes wood, erodes masonry, corrodes metal, and peels paint. It permeates everywhere when it evaporates and expands destructively when it freezes. It warps, swells, discolors, rusts, loosens, mildews, and stinks. And water is the elixir of life to rot and insects. All this damage has been caused by a tiny frost split in an attic pipe.
Water is one of the biggest problems with buildings because it comes from so many sources. It can be mixed with sewage, it can be rainwater, it can be water from washing machines, it can get into the fabric of the building, and once it does, it takes a long time to disappear. It stays there with warmth and cold, the problem's magnified.
Lambeth Housing Emergency, Samantha speaking. Can I help you?
Maintenance is a never-ending cycle. No one knows this better than a South London Council's emergency response team. Much of their work comes down to fighting the effects of water. Maintenance is low priority. When it competes with more pressing needs, it always loses. It's a slow-moving problem in a fast-moving world, so we let it go until it hands us a crisis. Mick Morley and Albert Mills belong to a small unit of workers providing round-the-clock emergency service for Lambeth Council. They are on call to deal with anything that goes wrong in the borough's 47,000 housing units. On a busy night, they handle as many as 100 calls.
Housing office, and I'll get them to send a contractor back out to do the job properly. We'll do what we can with it, but it needs to be done.
Someone got to come here tonight.
Yeah,
We've been in the whole weekend trying to use the toilet.
Right.
We can't even use
Well, I'll see if I can get a plumber out tonight. Hello, 799, you're receiving. Hello, Sam. What we've got is a brand new job. A toilet has been refitted, but by Donald Duck, I'm afraid. So we're going to need a plumber out here to rectify it because the toilet's totally unusable.
The toilet was not put in by the council's employees, but by someone else. It's a shoddy job, done in a hurry, typical of the low priority that maintenance usually gets.
A building is like a living thing, you know. It's bricks, mortar, timber, metal, glass, and it needs maintaining. If it's done a little bit and often, it'll be great. But if it's left for 30 years and then someone panics and thinks, oh, it's going to cost them too much. It may even be cheaper to knock it down and rebuild it.
The accumulated effect of rainwater running down the face of this old mill in the West Country has nearly split the building in half. The mill is virtually beyond repair thanks to 100 pounds that were not spent on a new downpipe. An empty building rots fast and attracts trouble. Once it is left unheated and unventilated, any moisture that gets in immediately begins to cause serious damage, with no one around to notice or worry. Just one loose roof tile can kill a whole building. The wind gets in and starts lifting the other tiles. Once the roof is open, water pours in, causing the walls to bow outward, and the house begins to collapse. People can be as destructive as weather to empty buildings. Squatters know better than most about the netherworld of semi-abandoned housing.
People actually go around in vans and break into old properties if they're boarded up or look empty, take out the fireplaces, take out skirting boards, light switches, floorboards, joists even, they'll even take out the joists, you know. And that's how they make their living, basically, by gutting the inside of houses. I've actually woken up and found people like knocking down walls in the property that I've been staying in. Like, I was up on the top floor, I heard loads of banging, come down, and there was this guy taking out a bay window. I was like, what the hell are you up to, man? There's people living in this property, you know?
The most important thing for the health of a building is its roof. This is where the water comes in. This is where the sun and weather blast the building. And this is where we seldom come, so we don't see how bad it's getting. Most buildings these days have flat roofs. Flat roofs always leak. And the worst of it is you can't tell where the leak is, so you wind up having to resurface the whole roof. This roof was redone 2 years ago. It leaks. Silverdale School in Sheffield is successful and popular. Built in the 50s, it has a history of severe problems with its flat roofs. Recently, matters came to a crisis for head teacher Enid Fitzgeorge Butler, and she had some tough decisions to make.
I actually have one of my deputies who's responsible for the building, and he's worked here for more than 20 years. He's an extremely reliable person, and he came into my office and said that he was at his wit's end and that he would consider resigning if we couldn't do something about the building. So I said, well, if you feel like that, then let's do something about it. We've had a constant battle with damp coming in. They actually not only built flat roofs, but they put the drains from the flat roofs down the inside of the classrooms. And if there is an area of the flat roof which is leaking, then the water siphons through and can run anywhere. So you could come in the morning and the ceilings would be down in the classrooms and water running across the floor. The main problem this year was that the whole of the top corridor started leaking very badly. There were spores hanging down from the ceilings, and then on top of all that the heating broke down. So I caused a bit of a stir by sending the junior pupils home and keeping the examination pupils in. But I was determined that I would have it fixed, because the place looked like an absolute slum. It was cold, it was wet, it was damp, and I don't see why young people and my teachers should be working in those kinds of conditions.
Flat roofs have been the norm for most of the 20th century. Architects liked their modern look, and they were cheap. Milton Keynes, built in the 70s, was flat roof city, and the local council had to convert many of them to pitched roofs. The city's Bean Hill estate was designed by a young architect named Norman Foster.
My old man is a football fan, his brain is turning wrong. Play, 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 all the bally day, he's at it all the whole night long. He wakes me up in the middle of the night, just when I'm in clover, blows a little whistle in my ear and shouts, "Half time, turn over."
When I came in 1975 to look at these places, they were, well, as I say, it was just like Dodge City. Bare, nothing, just square houses, just square, looked like prefabs.
Yeah, they reminded me of a holiday camp, plus a barracks, army barracks.
But the insides were ideal. The insides were beautiful.
But when the winter come on, we found there was quite a lot of problems. The rain was terrible, the noise of the rain, you know, on the flat roof. And then we found in all the rooms, as you can see from all these pictures, the different condensation and these buckets we had to put all over the house.
And then they decided that they would put new windows in. They put new windows in to try and solve this problem of condensation. That didn't work. Then they put fence in the windows. That didn't work. New letterboxes in. That didn't work. So then they decided, mind you, we had to fight for this. We kept complaining and we fought for it, and then they decided that they would put new roofs on, which they did. And from then on, things have improved.
These roofs are ideal now. Them flat roofs are no good whatsoever.
Maintenance simply isn't seen as a priority, particularly when it is competing with other demands that seem more pressing. The Sheffield Town Hall extension is a 70s building, still living on a 70s style budget. To keep the original acres of nylon orange carpet going, the cleaners have to water it to keep the static down. Go downstairs to the housing office and you see the reason why. People are lined up just to get a roof over their head. Neglecting maintenance doesn't just affect buildings, it affects people, even their health. The hidden cost is enormous, social as well as financial. The Rashid family occupies a 3-bedroom flat. Life there is a constant struggle against leaks, condensation, and damp.
পানি ভরতে আছে আমার একটা ছেলে ঘুমাইতে পারে না সব সময় পানি ভরে এই রুমে সব কাগজ উঠাইতে আছে আর এখানে থাকা খুব অসুবিধা এখানে পানি ভরতে আছে সব সময় সেখানেও পানি ভরতে আছে ও সহল সিলিং বাজে পানি সব সময় ভরতে আছে
You might think they're in the developing world somewhere, but they live in Stepney, London. When a team led by Dr. Peter Ambrose of the University of Sussex studied the 45-year-old housing blocks where the Rashids live, they found some sections that were practically uninhabitable thanks to poor maintenance. The team recorded high rates of asthma and other respiratory illness, as well as mental health problems. The study attempted to quantify the cost of the medical, police, and education time it took to treat the ill effects on the occupants caused by their housing. Ambrose's team estimated that just 5% more money spent at the construction phase of the building could have averted most of the maintenance problems. It's not just nostalgia that makes people enjoy traditional building materials like brick and wood. The fact is, they age beautifully, and they show, and they need maintenance. New materials tend to hide maintenance problems. Do you want a material that acts bad before it looks bad, or that looks bad before it acts bad? If you want a building to age well, there's nothing better than good old brick. For 8,000 years, it has been a superlative building material. It's just fired clay, but it's very strong and highly adaptable. It comes in a huge variety of colors and textures. Bricklayers feel an attachment to buildings they've constructed that other trades often don't.
If I was going to build a house, it's personal to me because I've got them off the lorry, I've loaded them out, I've laid the actual brick. From a foundation to setting it out, to getting up to DPC level, to actually building in the doors, the windows, everything, then it's all down to you, the whole lot, everything. You know everything about that building, everything. You drive along with your wife, or you drive along, or you walk along with your kids or whatever, you can say, oh, I've built that, and I've done that, and I remember doing that, and there was a particular time when I was up on the scaffolding with such and such, and we was doing that when we was building that. You know, it's sort of like, it's mine, it's my own building, I've done that. That's just, you know, a sense of achievement. Bricks manage time beautifully. They can last nearly forever. Their rough surface weathers handsomely in a way that keeps improving for centuries. These bricks are Roman. A further advantage is that brick is easily recyclable. Many a medieval English structure prominently displayed its recycled Roman brick. And Tudor builders worked brick to ornamental extremes, pushing the potential of this endlessly adaptable material still further. What you want in building materials is a quality of forgiveness. Clapboard siding, called weatherboard in Britain, is a skin made of overlapping planks. It's a classic example of a building material that looks bad before it acts bad. It tells you when it needs attention. The northeastern United States was called New England because that's what it was. Villagers from Essex and Suffolk brought traditional building practices there with them. As New Englanders, they turned clapboard into a high art. Built in 1637, the Fairbanks House is the oldest wood frame house in America. Joseph Cray is one of the latest to work on it. He works on many of the clapboard houses that cover the New England landscape.
What's important with maintenance of any house is like a person's health. If you don't have symptoms, and you can't recognize symptoms, you can't treat the disease that's behind it. And I think that it's the same situation as if a house needs paint or it looks shabby, you can upgrade it. You can maintain it. It kind of speaks to you about what the problems are. Or if paint starts peeling off in large sheets, you can see that there's a moisture problem inside.
Plastic and aluminum siding, on the other hand, conceal problems behind them. By the time you find out you've got to do something, the damage is probably serious. Clapboard expands and contracts comfortably with temperature extremes. It lets water vapor through, and it's easy to replace piecemeal.
That's why I stopped there. I said, yeah, I expect it to go at least to 11 or 12 feet.
If properly maintained, there's no reason why original clapboard can't remain on a house for a couple of 100 years or more. These old wooden houses, maintained over the years, develop personalities of their own. The sense of continuity is palpable.
Our family bought the house in 1796, and we've been here ever since. Our house lives and breathes. It lives and breathes. It breathes with the seasons. It gets cold and it gets hot and it gets swollen and it gets unswollen, and doors get stuck and doors stay open, doors stay closed. And we're right on where the northeast wind just whistles right through this house. And it takes care of it, and it beats it up all at the same time. But oh yeah, they have a life of their own. The two terms are home and house, and a lot of people have a house, and I really feel that we have a home. And when you have a connection, and it is a serious connection, it doesn't mean that it's your whole life. I mean, you can come and go in and out of it, but you have a sense of continuity. You have a sense of, when we do something in the house, I mentally sort of chat with everybody who was here before. You know, I just have a little chat with them and say, well, we think we're going to do this. What do you think? And so far, no one said no.
Wood is an adaptable, renewable material, but it does require vigilance. At Bishopston Church in Wiltshire, the building's very survival is threatened by beetles.
What these insects are doing, they're just essentially eating everything. The structure is getting frighteningly dangerous. I mean, already the roof is in a dire situation where if you go up there, you have to be very careful where you walk. And really, it needs to have something done to it very, very soon. Well, these insects, essentially, they're just doing what comes to them naturally, and perhaps it's our intervention which has caused the problem to begin with. I mean, they were quite happy living in forests before we built buildings out of wood, and that's where the forest went to. They're into our buildings now, and the beetles and other modes of decay, fungus or whatnot, are just taking advantage wherever they can. It's not going to last much longer, and it's a shame that it has gone so long, really. I mean, it would have been nice if, say, 100 years ago, someone had identified the problem and said, well, we should really do something about it now, before it gets too bad.
My friend Gregory Bateson used to tell the story of the oak beams of New College, Oxford. This is how it went. New College was founded in the late 14th century. It had, like other colleges at Oxford, a great dining hall with oak beams across the top. These might be 2 feet square, 40 feet long. A century ago, some busy entomologist poked at the beams and discovered that they were full of beetles. This was reported to the college council, who met in some dismay, because where would they find beams of that caliber nowadays? One of the junior fellows stuck his neck out and suggested there might be some oak on the college lands. So they called in the college forester, who of course had not been near the college for years, and asked him about oak. And he pulled his forelock and said, well, sirs, we was wondering when you'd be asking. On further inquiry, it was discovered that when the college was founded, a grove of oaks had been planted to replace the beams in the college hall when they became beetly, because oak beams always become beetly in the end. This plan had been passed down from one forester to the next for 500 years. You don't cut them oaks, them's for the college hall. A nice story. That's the way to run a culture. People involved in maintenance must always swim upstream, progressless against the current. The best satisfaction they can get from their work is to do it well. The measure of success of their labors is that the result is invisible. unnoticed. Thanks to them, everything is the same as it ever was.
Yeah, it's staying watertight.
Basil Pilgrim, a builder who specializes in timber frame houses, can trace an unbroken line of builders in his family back to 1810. They all lived around the same Suffolk village. He's hoping that his grandson will keep the tradition going.
I started working with my father when I was 14, and I was very keen to learn. I think that must have been in my blood. I've got 2 grandchildren, Robert and James, and they both seem as though they're going to carry on in the building trade, which I'm particularly pleased about. That house we looked at, they state that's built around 1450. That's been thoroughly overhauled by us. Everything has been done to it. It's been damp-proofed, the timbers have been treated. There's no reason why that house shouldn't stand there, well, you can say for another, well, a few hundred years, no problems at all. Main thing, as I've always maintained, you keep it dry at the top, keep the water out, good damp-proof course at floor level, stop the dampness from rising, keep it dry at the top, keep it dry at the bottom, that'll last forever.
Wood is wonderful for adaptability, but it's terrible in terms of maintenance. The great exception is timber frame buildings, because their wood structure is protected from the weather, it's massive, and it's exposed. Air and eyeballs can get at it to keep it dry and inspected. The average life of a stud house is 75 years. The life of a timber frame is at least 300 years. The romance of maintenance is that it has none. The joys it has are quiet joys, but it's a high calling, tending to a ship, to a garden, to a building. One is participating physically in a deep, long life. Next week, the series will conclude by examining how different kinds of buildings and different parts of buildings change in different ways and at different speeds, from cathedrals to department stores. How do buildings that survive the centuries develop and change over time? What makes a building come to be loved?